Somebody asked a great question recently in a comment that I have to make a video about because it sparked a lot of ideas. They wrote, what's the average best number of tracks to get an easy mix rather than their typical 900 audio tracks that they have on each project and never finishing the mix for the last 200 years? And they laughed. They got a good sense of humor, obviously. This was from Mystic Rebel 1089. The least amount of things you can possibly do within any given project to create an emotion and a result that makes you feel like you accomplished the goal is the answer. Now, here's where things go off the rails. People love to listen back and then say, it's not big enough. There's not enough here. It's too naked. It's too bare bones. What they're really saying is, I'm afraid to look at this thing naked. I am too vulnerable when this thing sounds the way it sounds without all the clutter on top of it. It's too I'm bearing my soul too much. They can hear my voice isn't perfect. They can hear that guitar riff wasn't perfectly played. They hear humanity. And I don't like that. It scares me. So I have to clutter it and layer it and dump all this shit on top of it in order to make this thing something that can be something I'm not scared to release, something I'm not scared to show people, because I'm going to dress this thing up in all these robes and jewelry and just this crazy snowman. You'll never see what's underneath, and that makes me feel comfortable. Now, if you think about things in that way, I think you get to the root of the problem, which is the thing you record with practically nothing there should be strong enough to make you feel like you got the point across. And if it's not, you need to record it again. Because that's really what we're talking about here, is that today, there's nobody helping the artist make those decisions. There's no producer sitting in the room of 98% or more of people who make music in their bedroom. Everyone's got their ability to record, which is great. And no one's telling them, yes, I believe what you're saying. Because that's something I started to think about, was like, why is it that when somebody records themselves, they record so many things? It's because they cannot choose which is better. They don't know. They're too close to it. It's very rare you get somebody who can see what they've done from this distant perspective and actually judge it. So that's one of the things. It's a very common deal when somebody records with me. The first thing I look for when I'm listening back to what was done is, do I believe them? They're saying a lyric about something. If it's sadness, okay. If it's happiness, great. Whatever it is it love? Is it this? When I hear the lyric, do I believe them? And is their intention to make me believe them? Or am I supposed to think that they're lying, or that this isn't true? Like, what's the intent behind the lyric? What's the overall frame of this song? How is it how would this be portrayed correctly? Do I have to believe you? Because if so, I don't believe you. You got to sing that line again, because I don't believe it. And on these other 2 takes you did, or 3, I don't believe any of them. They sound too opposite of what the mood of this thing should be, of what the emotion should be. It's not carrying weight. It feels just like throwaway. And if that's the case, you can't use that. Now, if you look through the performances and you find every piece of it to work, and here's the thing, I often think when people do a solid take straight through, they get way closer to emotional connectivity. They get way closer to a performance that will mean something, both to them and to anybody listening. Because the parts of the song where they're a little out of breath from having just done something else in the song, they all have a tendency to make sense. Whereas when you punch every line, you're manufacturing what you think the emotion or feeling should be there. Whereas when you have lyrics written that tell a nice cohesive story, that stuff often takes care of itself. What's the other big problem today? Every single thing people record, from the time they hit record on their DAW, they think is the final project. The final product, the final project, they think that's the thing that's going to be sent to mixing and mastering. Where's the demo stage? The demo stage was huge for everyone hundreds of years ago. Obviously, I'm being facetious. Long enough ago when you'd have something like this. You know what this is? This is the Roland 6-track jam, or it's basically 4 tracks with 2 stereo tracks. I used to use this thing. This has a floppy disk spot on it. Talk about crazy. That's a floppy. This was one of the things that I got, like, secondhand. Pawn shops used to have these things all over the place. I have one of these from when I was living down in Florida at one point years ago. I have another one of these that I basically started recording on. It was a Yamaha Mini Disc 4-track. Now, whether you've got something like that to lay your idea down, or you've got just a cassette player, how many bands would just hit the cassette player, work out the tune? See, that's the thing. When you put a bunch of guys together, everyone's judging stuff all the time. In that room, in real time, you're like, nah, man, don't play that guitar part. It clashes with this thing that I'm doing. Do something else. Get out of that zone. Or I got to get out of that zone because we're stepping on each other. I love what you're doing there on the bass. Can you do something else? And people would just talk to each other. Some guys easier to talk to than others, but those issues got worked out. In this dystopian society we live in today, where social media has made everyone 1,000% less social, hardly anyone plays together anymore. And the ones that do have a harder time talking to each other, hashing stuff out. But that cassette deck is a truth serum. That tape deck, you'd hit record, the band would play, you'd listen back later. More often than not, the recording would sound awful because the mic would be cranked way too loud to record the loud craziness of a live band in the room. But once you got good at that, you just place it in the right place. And that could be 2 rooms away. But the bottom line is you record everything. You'd listen back. You'd make corrections, adjustments. You'd record again. You'd be practicing the song. That's the demo stage. By the time you go in to record it, you guys are ironed out. Think Smells Like Teen Spirit. That whole album, Nevermind. They sent Butch a cassette. They were working stuff out like crazy, recording it, listening back. Like a football tape, being like, we got to hit this hole harder, man. What are we doing here, man? The tight end ain't got to pull. Bring that guard around. What's going, you'd figure this stuff out. It's no different. And then by the time you go into the place to record, where it's actually something you intend to release, you actually have an idea of what you're doing. You have intention. So when somebody asks me like that, how many tracks is the whatever, the least amount possible to get your idea across. Have a demo stage where you build the track trying to get almost nothing done. Don't layer and layer and layer and layer. If you're layering, ask, why am I layering? Why does this one part not work by itself? Maybe I need to tweak it. Then this is all demo stage. So that means some people think, they just come into the studio. They just want to record and get the idea down. That's not the time to get the idea down. That idea should be tattooed inside your brain way longer before you go into that room. That wasn't such good English there. Long before you get into the room, that idea should be fixed in your mind as far as what you want to do. And the beautiful thing about demo stages today compared to recording on a cassette deck or on a freaking thing like this, the best thing is you could actually export something you did and use it today. Easy peasy. You're not dealing with connecting stuff and maybe it comes out, with crazy artifacts on it, or maybe it's just too noisy and gross to be able to pull off a cassette or something on some old school 4-track to be able to get it. Like, there's all sorts of reasons that you wouldn't be able to do that a while ago. Today, you might be able to do it, where you just take it out of your DAW, put it in the new one, and now, if it's some keyboard sample thing you built or whatever, you could still use it. But that intention behind creating a demo is lost today. It was so valuable because it gave another chance for you as the artist to hear yourself objectively, which doesn't happen anymore. Now you just build, and then once you layer dirt on dirt on dirt on dirt, you can't tell nothing. And then you send it off to somebody and go, you guys, you pick. I trust you. You pick the stuff to work or whatever. I got news for you. Mixing engineers that are picking parts for you as far as what works and what doesn't, that's a producer's job. As soon as you make a decision on performances, you are now producing. I've heard numbers of people say that, but the names of these jobs have gotten so smashed and mushed together over the years. The more and more people record themselves, the less and less they understand about how this works. And the intention behind what you record is what's going to make mixing easier. It's what's going to make the production stage easier for you to know you have what you want, which literally means get comfortable being vulnerable too. Because I'm telling you, the inherent problem where I started in this video is that you don't like the way you sound bare, naked, freaking vulnerable. You don't like that. You have to start liking that. All these amazing performances, when I think of what's an amazing performance, I think they had a do less mentality more often than not. And that was imposed on them by the fact that they had a 24-track tape machine. If they were lucky, they had two tied together. And when I say lucky, I mean big budget. Most likely, they had very few tracks to get things done, so they had to make decisions. That's why things like that Roland 8-track jam was so good to use, because it forces you to make decisions, to commit things. You can't just layer all this stuff because you got to put it together at some point. So those things are helpful because there's limits. So put limits on yourself while you're in the recording production stage. Act like you have 12 tracks only, 16 tracks only. Can we make this work? It'll naturally go up. And to answer that question that they asked me more specifically, I like to make every session 48 tracks or less. It's could it be 56 or whatever? Yes. Could you use folders to put stuff together and then I guess. But what I'm saying is you break stuff down. You spend more time prepping the session, and that will be more easy to mix later. So the time is the same. You're either going to fight with it when you're mixing and try to figure out what's what, or you'll combine and comp stuff together and basically commit things that were, lots of tracks into smaller groups of stuff to be able to then handle it. And that's more prep time, but it's worth it. Because then when you go sit down to mix, you got to realize you're losing perspective every minute you listen to the song. Every minute you got to figure out what something is while you're trying to mix. You've lost your ability to hear as well. And you've lost your ability to have this fresh perspective on the mix, which you already don't have because you also recorded it. So you're already at a disadvantage from somebody who's never heard it before and just sits down to work. In other words, they might even like it more than you because they haven't heard it, whereas you're kind of beat up on it. Even if it's your favorite song, you know where all the bodies are buried and they don't. So they're going to hear the thing and say, where's the emotion? Let me pull it out. You're going to hear the thing and be like, where's that little guitar nonsense thing I did, at the end of the third verse that took me 17 takes to do? I got to make sure I hear that. It could be the most inconsequential thing that steps on everything else, and you won't know it because you thought it was so important. But the person listening goes, your emotion is here. You're focused on this little tit thing means nothing over here. Like, what's the point? So I'm just saying there's so much to this, and I think people got to get their head around the fact that if you don't like it, it's not because you have to add more. It's because you need to perform again. You need to perform until when you hear it with hardly anything, you do like it. That's the secret. That's the answer to being happy. Do a demo first. And then once you do that, everything's ironed out. You could always re-record it. The color and the shape. Foo Fighters. They did that whole album and then determined they didn't get it. They went back and did it again. That's why that album sounds as tight as it does. And there's really no difference between... They probably did a demo first and then still did that. There's no difference between that than doing a demo of your stuff on a limited amount of tracks, as little as possible. And then realizing what needs to stay, what needs to go. Then record it for real. Even though it's your studio both times, you got to treat the demo stage with care. I'm telling you, it'll make everything better. Hit the comment section. Let me know what you think. Leave a like. Subscribe if you haven't. Plenty more to come. We mix songs daily on live stream. It's about every other day. So Join our crew. We got engineers all over the world. Like, we're all on multiple sides of the freaking hallway working on our stuff, and then we meet up in the lounge. That's what's up. It's right here on YouTube. Cost you nothing. We'd love to see you there. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.